Hi and welcome to Lesson 8. Now, we actually started getting something happening on the scene with our 3D objects. We're going to do something a bit more exciting now. We're going to get this spinning around. So I've got the cube script right now, and I introduced you to vector 3 in the last video. What we're going to do is we're actually going to start using some of the built-in functions. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to get rid of that. So we're going to leave the cube wherever it was in our scene. So it should be in the middle. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the help functions that come within Unity. So I mentioned before we look at the transform, and we hit this button here, and we should come up eventually. We'll come up with the Unity manual. It does take a little while sometimes, but when it does eventually come up, you should have Unity manual that lists the information about that particular component. You clicked a little book reference on, and obviously we've got plenty written about each of the different components where it's required. This one's fairly simple. The transform, as I mentioned, is a pretty big one. It's a position, rotation and scale of your object. If you switch to scripting, you get some information about some of the variables that this class particularly holds, and some of the functions that you can employ upon it. Things like translate, which moves the transform in the direction and distance of translation, and things like rotate. We're going to work on this rotate. There's some big words here like Euler angles. It basically means that we're breaking it down into an X, or Y and a Z component, just like the three values here. So if I click on rotate, we'll go to the help for rotate, and you'll be able to see some of the an example and a little bit of an explanation about how this actually works. I do want to point out this time.delta time at this point. It's kind of important because if you're going to use the transform and try and set position and rotation and make this thing move, it's important that you move it at a certain speed, no matter what computer you're running on. If we have a look at the function, and I'll explain that as we go. So inside the update function, if you look at the transform, we used it earlier on. If we access the transform component, because the transform is such an important component, it comes with its own handle. So small t transform accesses the transform component of this object, and then we hit the dot and we hit the rotate, and then we pass a parameter, a single parameter here, a vector 3 that we looked at in the last one. There are other versions called polymorphism, which is a lovely, wonderful word, but basically there are other versions of the transform.rotate. One of them, in fact, just takes three values, an X, a Y, and a Z, and rotates it around those three values. So we're going to, now that I've shown you where to find this help, you should be able to, if you have trouble, you should be able to jump straight to the help to get some more help on what's happening. So we don't actually need the start function, so we're going to leave that blank, and we're going to go into the update. We're going to start typing in transform, which is the transform of this object, and we're going to start typing in rotate, and press tab when we're ready. Now, you've got a few versions, as I mentioned, of this function. If you flick up and down, it'll give you some help on them. But by typing, each one is a different signature, so it won't get confused if you're at the wrong one when you start typing stuff in. We're just going to start typing in three values. So I'm going to say 0, 1, 0. And what that'll do is it'll rotate 1 degrees around the Y. That's the second value in, so that would be the X, that would be the Y, and that would be the Z. The key here is that it's going to go 1 degrees around the Y every single frame. So update is running every single frame. So if I save this code and go into Unity and run, every single frame this cube will spin 1 degree. So you can see it spinning around. Now yours might be moving faster than mine, or it might be moving slower than mine. It depends on the computer that you have in front of you, and how many cores you have, and what the GPU is like, and what the frame rate is. Which is why it's a good idea to multiply this by time dot delta time. I'll explain that this is just the number, a very small number, but it's the amount of seconds that's passed since the last frame, and it will be a very small number like 0.0001 or something like that. So every time you come around, no matter what computer you're running on, this will go at the same speed. So this will turn 1 degree per second. Now 1 degree per second isn't very fast, but 10 degrees per second is a little bit faster. So I'll just save the code and we'll run this, and we'll go over to the play again, and you'll see that it's going to turn quite slowly. That's 10 degrees per second. Now I'm just going to do it, but you can experiment with this as well. You can change this number. Having a number in here is actually bad programming practice. It's probably quite a good idea to make it a public variable. So I'm going to make it public float, and I'm going to call it speed because it's the speed of rotation. Speed's a fairly good name for that. If I could be bothered typing, I'd maybe say rotation speed. And I'm going to take this variable and use it here. That way, because it's public, I'll be able to see it up the top. I'm going to initialize this to a value of 10 was pretty slow, so I'm going to say 50. And I'm going to leave that there. So speed will be 50. It's a public variable. I've saved my code with Control S. I go back in here and I can see this value should pop up over here. So the speed is 50. When I press play, you'll see that this will be turning at 50 degrees per second. And if I want to, I can change this number to see a value that I like. So I've turned it up to 360 nearly, so that's spinning 1 rotation per second. When you press play again, the changes that you made go back, so that's an important thing to remember. Maybe make sure to change things over here, make sure you unplay the game so that you're able to make those changes and they'll stay. So hopefully that makes things a little bit clearer how we access components. We're going to be working a little bit more on moving towards accessing some of the other components and making a game in the next few tutorials.